I am not the charm and good looks candidate in this race, as though that needed to be said, right? The reason I'm in this race is to say some things that are going to make people uncomfortable, and apologies in advance if there's anything that I say that makes you uncomfortable. Indeed, if you walk away from our chat today thinking, you know, your day is going to be better, it's warm and fuzzy, and all of the spring flowers are going to smell better than yesterday, you and I are not communicating. Our government is going in the wrong direction. It's going in the wrong direction hard and fast. The reason we have such a big opportunity in 2024 is for this reason. And because we have an opportunity in very specific ways, it plays right into our hands. More Americans than ever before are recognizing that many of the problems we have in the United States are the result of bad public policy. People understand that while our economy looks a lot like the 1970s and 80s, some of you youngsters will have to ask some people at your table with gray hair about what I'm talking about. The big difference is that people don't trust our democratic institutions quite the way that they used to. That's not our fault, right? That's because your government operates in a way that is not trustworthy and that is finally coming to light to be so. Much of what I talk about includes hard-edged reform. I was a police officer for 11 and a half years. I spent a lot of time talking about criminal justice reform. I worked in Washington for 20 years, and I spent a lot of time talking about monetary policy and fiscal policy until your eyes will glaze over, right? But here's the bottom line. We need to develop a platform, what I'm running on, we call the Gold New Deal. You can learn about it over at the desk. We need to run with a platform that cuts hard edges against the Democrats and hard edges against the Republicans both. We need to deliver a message that is memorable, that distinguishes us from the other parties. It's our opportunity to reach people in a way that we have not reached before because people are so sick and tired of not only the duopoly, but the way our government runs. But it's not merely an opportunity for us. I believe that this is an obligation. We don't have a tremendous period of time between now and the time that our government will have headed too far in the wrong direction irretrievably. By the end of this century, our federal government will be fiscally irretrievable. We run the risk the most important democracy in the history of the world will eventually fail from a government financial point of view. We run the risk that we'll get so far away from the Constitution that we won't recognize the reason our Constitution was put together in the first place. Remember that we, as libertarians, we are the philosophical descendants of the people that founded this country, and for only one good reason. That's to protect our individual liberty. Do you think if we don't stand up for it, a Democrat will? Do you think a Democrat will stand up for your Second Amendment rights, your First Amendment rights? No, of course not. Will a Republican go out there and talk about how important it is to pull back the projection of military power around the world for no other reason than to protect our hegemony? No, no one is going to say that if we don't say that. It's up to us to say that. Now look, we have, how many people in the room today? 40 or 50, right? This is terrific. Multiply that by 50. A couple of thousand people at conventions all around the United States representing the Libertarian Party. This is not a large number of people. It's time for everyone to pick up a shovel. This is the way that I'm picking up a shovel, because I believe that we can distinguish our party from the other parties. But we need to do so by leading a hard-edged, policy-based campaign. We need to back it up with a professional team. I'm already putting together a professional team already. And we need to back it up, to be honest, with a candidate with a background in public service and public policy, because that's what the American people expect in a campaign and in a candidate, to get the deference that we need from the media, from donors, and from the American voters. This is the way I believe the campaign has to be run, and it's not just because of a great opportunity we have. This is our call of duty. This is important. This is where we need to start making a difference. We need to do it today. Thanks a lot. One of the things that Chase and I disagree on most fundamentally is this question. I I agree with everything Chase said, and yet I think that that's just fundamentally the wrong answer. The right answer is that we're not going to compromise at all, which was the question. Not only are we not going to compromise, we're going to lean into those particular issues that draw a distinction between us and the other parties. For example, if we're out there saying, you know, we believe that we need to be more fiscally conservative, you balance your budget at home, we need to balance the budget in Washington, you've said the same thing as most Republicans and Democrats. The difference, of course, is that they don't mean it and we do. But as far as differentiating from those parties in a political sense, to be honest, you're wasting your time. The problems that we have in the federal government are fundamental. They're institutional. We need the most transformative proposals. We need to back them up. We need to back them up hard in a principled, uncompromising way. The reason that I'm more optimistic about being able to deliver that message than most candidates is because, for example, I did work with the Federal Reserve System. I've met with the Federal Reserve Board in the boardroom itself. I've had my research on the banking industry cited by the Federal Reserve Chairman. I'm not kidding around with these people anymore. The Federal Reserve System has to go. I'm sorry if I need to explain it to someone. The way that we budget in the United States has to go. We need fundamental changes. Yours is a government that operates in the shadows and does not operate for your benefit. It operates in order to bring more power to itself for the benefit of those who lead it. Fundamental change. Remember, we're not going after 100% of the voters. We're not going after 50% of the voters. 38% wins. We're going after 15% of the voters in order to get into the debates. And to get 15% of the voters, you need to stand out hard. Thanks. Agreed. And agreed that doesn't mean you have to compromise on your principles. We need to run a campaign that's very, very different from the campaigns that we've run in the past. The Jorgensen campaign, I mean, no disrespect to Jo, I think she's a wonderful person. She's always been very kind. But she missed opportunities to lean into the issues of the day, and so did the Gary Johnson campaigns, which of course is why they imploded after Gary did reach double digits in the polls. But he failed to give voters a reason to rally around him and realize what it is, you know, the principles by which he stood, which would have pulled him through the dark times when he forgot the name of the town in Syria, for example. The answer has got to be, you've got to vote for your principles. And that if people vote for their principles, you would realize that you will win. You will win in two different ways. Number one, if we can get to 15% in the polls, and I'm sorry, but if you say that we can't, you're the one who's not being realistic. Gary Johnson did get to double digits in those polls. And he was running a campaign based on, see if I can get this right, I'm fiscally conservative like a Republican and socially liberal like a Democrat. I'm sorry. If that's your slogan, you're not actually running for president. You're just not out there campaigning in a way that differentiates you from the Republicans and Democrats. You've defined yourself in their context. And he still made it to double digits in the polls, and that was because he had a background in public service. He had a background in public policy. People were willing to give him some deference, right? So you can go pretty far based on background alone. But you can't make it all the way, which is why I think that the platform is so important to lead with hard-edged public policy. Yes, you can reach 15%. You get in those debates, you don't know what the debates will look like, even if they'll exist at this point, then you can get more attention. It is not true that we cannot play a role on the political landscape in this country. We can. There's not a lot in the Department of Justice I would keep. I would get rid of the FBI. My biggest hobby horse is getting rid of the IRS, and the reason for that is because I don't like the direct relationship financially between the federal government and we as Americans, as individuals. Anyone who's been audited here, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands because it's kind of weird. I'm just going to just look at Clint and tell he's been audited. If he hasn't been audited, he's probably a good place to start. I'm in a heartbeat. Anyone who's been audited knows that that's a very unpleasant experience. And of course, the reason is because it's a lopsided battle, right? You have no say in that. The IRS has its own courts. You are literally guilty until you can prove yourself innocent, which is a really weird way to go. Jason just brought that up in a different context. So the IRS is a thing that we need to get rid of real quick and force the federal government to go directly to states to raise money instead of to us. Because states can stand up on our behalf a lot better than individuals can. I do believe that the federal government has to get out of the idea of criminal justice, which is why I've got a problem with the Attorney General. That's got to go. And to your point, Department of Homeland Security, anything that even rhymes with CIA has got to go. This whole idea, and look, yes, it rhymes. Yeah. A lot of us did not expect that the CIA was behind the explosion of the pipeline in the Baltic Sea, right? But no one here can say you were completely shocked by the reports that came out a month or two ago that the United States was behind that. Don't tell me you were shocked. You might say, well, I didn't really see that coming. There were plenty of other people. Don't tell me you were shocked, because you weren't. Some part of your brain was ready to hear that. And for this reason, we really need to get out of the idea of agencies inside the federal government operating with nothing more than a White House wink and a nod. Those are the ones that got to go first.
I wonder if you could talk about what you think the duopoly gets wrong about democracy, and how should we as libertarians be talking to our, non-liberty-based friends and family about democracy?
One of the big things I think it gets, that could be a long list, right? But one of the things that immediately comes to mind is that each of the parties has given up on the agenda that it traditionally pursued. You have to admit, the number one objective of the Republican Party is keeping Democrats out of power, and vice versa. And because of that, they're willing to do almost anything to accomplish that. Which is why, of course, politically, the parties have come together so close, and is our opportunity to stand out and stand against them. Having said that, the reason it's so important is because this is where authoritarianism comes from in a democracy. You can see this in places like Asia and Europe, certainly in Latin America. Every week you see this happening. Some politician convinces you that what you should fear is not the loss of your civil liberties. It's not the loss of your government's adherence to your Constitution. What you really need to fear is that other idiot coming to power, right? And if you give me more power, I'll prevent that from happening. That's where authoritarianism comes from. That's the direction we're going today. For this reason, we need to keep, not only do we need to stand up against the duopoly, but we need to keep government from continuously bringing more power to itself. Because that's what sets up the zero-sum game where one side wins, one side loses, and then they do whatever the hell they want while they're in power.
In Washington state, there are only two recognized major political parties, the Republicans and the Democrats. To reach major party status, the Libertarian presidential candidate must get over 5% of the vote. What will you do if nominated to help specifically the Libertarian Party of Washington to reach this major milestone?
Well, because you're on the edge. Remember, you did get 4 something under Gary. I don't remember I apologize for not remembering exactly the number. But you've been close. That makes it a worthwhile destination. In other words, if you had to get to 5 and you've never made it past 0.5 in the past, I'm sorry, you might have to go to the back of the bus, right? But because you have been so close, this has got to be one of those states where the campaign spends a lot of time and energy. Generally speaking, I believe that we can do so much better nationwide than we have in the past by no longer going after 50, 60, 70% of the voters. We need to go after that third of the voting population that we can reach, going with a hard-edged message of public policy, a platform that's identifiable, that distinguishes us from the others. People will hear that, and we need to have the advertising campaigns that we run be early, loud, fast, hard to get the ball rolling. That's what we can do nationwide. But specifically, this is one of those states where we need to spend extra energy.
Would you support the full disclosure January 6 footage or does this represent a genuine national security threat?
I don't know that there is a no to that. Is there a counterexample? Is there something that you would want not fully disclosed? In other words, not only is the answer yes, it needs to be fully disclosed. And by the way, certain people have gotten their hands on it, right? It's a little
Yeah,
weird.
I mean,
A
it
little
has been
weird that Fox
selectively
News got
edited,
their hands on it.
if I'm not
But it needs to
mistaken.
be fully disclosed more generally. It should have been put on the governmental website a long, long time ago.
We don't have the money. We don't have the members. What is your strategy and plan to be a serious contender?
There's two important elements that, and we each have campaigns that are going to be a little bit different from what you've seen in the past. So let me speak as plainly as I can to everybody in the room as an adult and as a libertarian. The reason my campaign is going to be so different is because I'm a different candidate and because my platform is a different platform. It's not because it has this cute name, Gold New Deal. You can all visit goldnewdeal.org, by the way. It's not because of the cute name. It's because it does contain the most transformative ideas. That I'm committing myself to this package of ideas in advance because I'm not trying to win your hearts to these ideas. You already believe in them. I'm committing to them in advance so that you know I can't back down from them. Not merely that I'm asserting that I won't. I can't back down from them. The way that we get attention is by standing out. The press likes a good story, even if that good story is an underdog story. But you have to be different from the other candidates. Having said that, the world's most transformative ideas lay flat if you don't have the background to back them up. It is true that when a 20-year university professor of economics talks about ending the Fed, that's a different animal than standing out of my balcony and baying at the moon. It just is. When I talk about criminal justice reform, I do so as a police officer. When I talk about changing budgeting and not spending so damn much money from the federal government, it comes from an economist who's worked in the budget office for the White House. There is a difference between the deference that's given to someone with a public service background by the media, by donors, by a lot of voters. This is what I plan to leverage. Now, a lot of us might say, well, you know, all that background is, it's a load of crap from a libertarian point of view. Sometimes I feel that way, right? But the truth of the matter is that if you want to reach everybody out there, you got to be able to prove that you've walked the walk.
Okay, so standing out is the main crux of your strategy.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the things that you need to lead with, look, for us, there's an ethical proposition. The government just doesn't have the authority to overrun the Second Amendment and to compromise your right to do whatever it is that you want to do. There's an ethical consideration. Americans look at that and feel like if they disagree, right, if they don't respect your right to carry, for example, your right to own, your right to use, they feel like there's an ethical consideration there because they believe that it would make a positive contribution to reducing violence if we were to compromise people's Second Amendment rights. So one of the things that we need to lead with, in addition to the ethical consideration about power and authority, we need to lead with the fact that compromising your Second Amendment rights would not do any good. As a police officer, I can tell you that if you make it illegal for people to carry, the only people who are going to carry are criminals. They don't care whether it's legal or not. They can get a weapon. You can't criminalize something without creating a black market in it if our culture isn't ready to give it up. This is a problem that our government, a rabbit hole our government goes down in so many lanes, creating black markets for things. Creating a black market for weapons is not going to do anybody any good. So as a practical matter, gun control just doesn't work. And we need to make that point. We can point to Washington, D.C. and plenty of other places where it's completely illegal. It just doesn't help the situation. And as a police officer, I have plenty of experience making that case.